All right, you can see our beautiful LS in our Audi, and we've had a lot of comments because there's a lot of new subscribers since this car was last on the channel. Most of you guys are saying, why wouldn't you just go with a 5-cylinder Audi? They make great engines. And you are 100% right. But we are in Canada, and we're in the country. It's probably more prominent in the cities in Toronto and that, where there's Audi clubs and that. But they are too expensive because we're gonna break it. 100% we're gonna blow this thing up. And as good as Scott is at rebuilding my engines, he's already building number 3 because we know that we're gonna test it, we're gonna abuse it, and we are gonna break it, which is why we went with an LS. We can probably build between 10 and 12 LSs for the cost of one 5-cylinder Audi. That being said, there's already Audis with 5 cylinders in them that have proven themselves and have done very well, but there's only a handful of LS swapped Audis. That's why we went with this one. So this one was a perfect match for our turbos. Actually a bit more displacement than what the turbos can handle. We'll get into that video next where we port the 4 turbos and make it a much better match. And if we find that we don't have as much back pressure as we did with the original setup, we can upgrade to a 5.3 or a 6 or whatever. In the meantime, we are only trying to get about 800 foot-pounds of torque, which is dancing on the line of shearing shafts in our transmission. We had our transmission rebuilt, which was expensive enough back then when we did the Project Car Challenge, and we're still basically on the same guts. We had Drive Sport rebuild it and add a limited slip diff in the front, but we know that we are going to shear shafts at 800 foot-pounds of torque, which is why this 4.8 is a perfect match for that. We can get to that power goal, have it consistent, have really high torque, really down low so that it pulls like crazy. And once we destroy that transmission, then we'll reassess where we're going from that. Whether we go bigger displacement, dog box, all of that will have to depend on what our budget looks like when we break it. For now, I don't feel we got our money's worth out of that transmission yet, so we're not gonna break it yet, and we are going to make this 4.8 be the best match for transmission and turbos right now. This thing will break. It is a giant science experiment, and we will upgrade constantly, have some fun with it, and then we will put in another LS, probably 10 or so more. Here we go.
RS2 is a very sought after car in Europe and all over the world. It makes a lot of jam. Those are like unobtainium, by the way, those cars.
This is easy. Like,
yeah, that's the way it should be.
Yeah. Biggest concern for racers is fires, and we want to eliminate any fire hazard that we can underneath the hood. That will get bolted to this goodness. We got to kind of talk about what we're doing and why.
All new cam bearings off the bag of bearings, which is what I like to use.
When we met with McLeod, they said, what are you doing? That's not a racing clutch. This is a racing clutch.
I need a different hat. Throw some spare change, I'll run and grab it.
All right.
So I'm just thickening up the bead on the one end. It already had one. This marvelous contraption needed some modification because it flexes and bends and it's not garbage. It's a good start if you're doing like 10
It's not garbage if you like spending like 4 hours making it good, yeah. Or, yeah.
Well, the next step up from this is like $1,300 US.
Yeah.
So the
If you're
150 I spent on this, plus the time. My time ain't worth much apparently, so we're ahead of the game.
So anyway, that's looking pretty good. And then you peened one of the rollers over. It seized up solid already?
Yeah. Because I was cranking so hard, some shmoo got in between. There's no bearing. It's just 2 pieces of metal, and it locks solid. So I had to take it all apart and lube her up.
But no more boots coming off.
No more boots.
So the rad and the intercooler's out?
Yeah, they're over on the back wall.
Yeah, so we're gonna flush those two.
We'll go check out the Audi, how naked it is inside. It looks weird, like
It's kind of sad. There's a lot of...
There's a garage sale in there right now.
Yeah. So yeah, no turbos. Oh, this is a mess. We need to vacuum it, clean it, and then we'll get the rad.
Like dip it in Varsol to get all the like oil residue out of it, and then start over again. That's coming.
right, so we're back at the machine shop, and you're already rocking and rolling.
Yeah, starting to install some of them. Yeah.
Okay, but we got to kind of talk about what we're doing and why. Now, We're doing a 4.8 because we thought that would be a good match for our turbos. Our turbos is the limiting factor, but not a whole lot of people build 4.8, so there's not a whole lot of aftermarket support for it, right? So the 5.3 and the 4.8 block are exactly the same, but the crankshaft is different.
Yeah.
So we weren't able to get a upgraded crankshaft, right?
Nope.
So what
It's already a steel crankshaft, so it's already a better quality crankshaft.
Okay.
So
what do we do to it to make it perfect? This is a used crank. I don't even know where.
yeah, use
this
crank.
one came
There's absolutely nothing wrong with this crank. It's perfect. Right as soon as you brought it to us, what we do is we put it in our machine, we magnaflux, check for cracks. If everything's healthy there, in my experience, the biggest problems that we have with the 4.8s and the 5.3s and the 6 liters is right from factory. There is no chamfer on the oil hole, so you get a straight cut, and the aluminum bearings that are in it, there's no grooves, full grooves in them. So you're losing a lot of accessibility to your oil pressure and floating of the crank. So what we do on this crank that you have in here is I chamfered and elongated the holes in here so it picks up that oil better and gets the oil out faster. I only send one piston, one rod, rings, circlips, bearings. He takes those numbers and puts bob weights on the rotating side of the crank. And as he spins that up, the machine will pick up where the vibrations are and will tell you where to add or to remove weight to get your numbers in. While he's doing the balancing, I can start doing the blueprinting, I guess you can say, of the block. So then I get my center line, I deck the block. Now, because of your application, I felt like this engine runs a little bit tight. For factory, they run a little tighter. They only have about 1 thou clearance and then have a little bit of skirt coating. So we threw an extra thou clearance in there because your turbo's in heat.
Okay.
And then gapped all the rings, decked the block square to the center line of the crank. We also decked and squared the heads. And yeah, now I'm just starting to put in. I have 3 pistons in and just getting ready to put the 4th in. The balancing is so important because it makes the engine not work against itself. So when you have one piston coming out this way, if it has, say, an extra 10 grams, now don't hold me to my math, but from what from my experience and what I've learned, a difference of say around 5 or 6 grams at say 3,000 RPM is like the difference of having 200 pounds extra being on that piston.
Okay.
So if this piston is 6 grams over and this piston is 6 grams under, well, now you have a difference of say 400 pounds of rotational mass kicking out, wanting to go all over the place. So the reason of balancing is to make sure those numbers are all right. So this engine isn't fighting itself and it's running perfect.
Okay.
And, no stress.
So we went with a Mali kit, and it still has a cast piston, but is it going to work for what
It's
we
a
need?
machined cast piston, so it's not a full forged, it's a different process. Still high quality pistons, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mali is some of the best stuff factory on the market.
Okay.
For a factory replacement type piston.
Okay.
I use them in pretty well every application that I can use them in.
Okay.
They're great pistons, and even those things were very close in weight. That just shows me that the processes that they use is high quality too.
Okay. The pistons are balanced. It's just a giant compressor,
Yep.
but the magic of getting air into it. So how do we go about that? So first, cam. You replace the cam bearings.
Yeah, all new cam bearings, all Throwout cam bearings. They're all the good Babbitt bearings, which is what I like to use. All H bearing rod bearings.
Okay.
So it's high performance, but they're HN, so they're high performance, which is the hard bearings, and they're roughly 10 thou thinner, and that helps with your oil bleed off and everything. Cam slides right in.
So you always have a problem with the.
In my experience, yes. I don't know.
Center 3 have always been a pain.
I don't know why it is, but for some reason, every 5.3, 4.8, and 6 liter, the cam bearings always have to be fitted. If it goes in tight in any way, now the 6 liters are common for blowing out your center cam bearings.
Okay.
It's a very, very common problem. There's only one oil hole in it, so if the cam bearing does catch and rotate, you're done in the block scrap. So that's if I put it together and I can't get it to rotate by hand like this with no lubrication on it,
Yeah.
then I keep working at it until it's perfect.
So somebody's gonna say you put that cam in dry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you do it because
I do it dry because lubrication will hide the fact that there's a sticky spot.
Okay.
And Babbitt is already a naturally lubricating material.
Okay.
So it's not gonna hurt nothing. It slides in there and it doesn't create a mess. If you start lubing this up and it's nice and slippery and it spins nice now, then you go to start it and then it gets some heat into it. Well, now you're gonna lock that up. And who are you gonna be coming to? Me, right? Comp was nice enough to give us a complete kit, minus timing chain, push rods, springs, retainers, locks, even seals, lifters, everything.
Okay.
It was a great package. All their numbers were bang on. We didn't even have to do any machining to the head for spring pockets. The head, these things from factory are already really nice heads.
Yep.
Flow nice. There are some drag race guys. I'm not saying nothing about drag race. They can be dialed in a lot higher, get a lot more power out of them. But for what our budget is,
yep,
these things are awesome.
Okay, so these are 243 heads, which is the same as the 709 heads. So they flow a little better.
Yep.
So what have you done to the heads? You decked them?
Decked them, squared them. I used my bits to put the nice contour into them. And what we do is we port that ledge. So the ledge that meets your intake runner
yep.
and exhaust runner, that's what we port so there is no disturbance in your airflow.
Okay.
So everything's nice and smooth and there is no angles except for at the seat.
Awesome. So we got the heads, we got the cam, we've got the crank in there. What's left?
Put them together.
Okay, so we got our engine back. This is now a balanced, blueprinted engine. I guess I'm gonna call it that anyway. There's nothing more satisfying than there it is. Oh, love it. Nothing compares to unwrapping a brand new engine for your race car. We are one of the few people, I think there's a couple other people that have an 01E 6-speed mated to an LS. And most people have a big fat adapter plate that does some stuff and then moves the clutch out and whatnot. We didn't do that. We opted to grab some a rim from a transport truck and just a 4060 bell housing and make our own. And we mated that to our original clutch, which was the cheapest one that we could find that could handle 600 foot-pounds of torque or something around there. And when we met with McLeod, they said, "What are you doing? That's not a racing clutch. This is a racing clutch."
This particular RXT is built on a dedicated flywheel, so we don't have to use an adapter ring. The idea behind the adapter ring is to allow somebody to use a stock flywheel or somebody else's brand flywheel,
right,
if they choose to do so.
Okay.
And we have the standard 10.5 and 11-inch clutch pressure plate patterns drilled into it. When you use a dedicated flywheel, we drill the flywheel to our specific RXT and RST patterns.
Okay, so this is what we got. This is actually what we ordered.
Right.
And what's this good for?
That's good for up to 800 horse in the twin application.
Okay, but meant for racing?
Street only, really street only.
Yeah. So they were impressed that the clutch held up as much as it did with us running this on it and the center plate.
Right. I'm sure there's other people that do things they're not supposed to do with those and we don't know about it. But we really feel more comfortable with this in a typical, just high-performance street application.
Okay. Go fast, but stay on the highway. Don't shift every 3 seconds.
Yeah, typically a high-horsepower street car is going to start spinning the tire before anything happens. And that's our friction point. It's not the clutch disc.
Right.
But when you put a sticky tire on, you end up with the track. That friction point then just starts continuing up the drive line. And eventually you're going to get to the clutch and find this limiting point.
Okay, so then this is...
And that's the answer.
Okay.
Okay, so this not only holds more horsepower and torque, but this material can dissipate heat much better than this material can.
Okay, even though there's less friction material?
Yeah, this material is way more aggressive than this material is.
Okay.
So we don't need to line the whole thing with it.
Okay, and then when you get into this?
That is a full-blown race disc, which is what you will end up with in your 9-course clutch.
Okay.
This is sintered iron material. The hotter you get it, the grabbier it gets.
Okay. We're good at getting stuff out.
Yeah. So that will eventually, once you get it hot enough, will turn into a light switch.
Okay.
It's gonna be on or off.
We were taught in school, yeah, don't touch the clutch lining, but if you do,
Well, that's why we have brake cleaners.
Yeah, but it'll burn off the first time you sort of slip it anyway, will it not?
Yeah, no, it will. A lot of these parts are also untreated steel too. So if you know, believe it or not, the oil from your fingers. If I put my thumbprint on here, we come back a week later, you're gonna see my thumbprint.
Right.
So the moisture in the air gets drawn to the oil. So we really try not to manhandle it.
Yep.
But if you do, you're just making it uglier, not affecting its performance.
Okay, perfect. McLeod, they said, you know what, we'll hook you up with a proper clutch, just send us your old one. So we sent them our old one. It went to USPS's hands. We paid for insurance, we paid for tracking, and then it just went poof. Unlike Rob Dom, we were not able to buy it back on eBay. So we lost our clutch. Now that was a big deal because this clutch is meant for an LS. It was meant for a GM engine, but we had specific hubs made to fit the splines on our 01E transmission. On top of that, we had to get cones made so that the one clutch disc goes inside the other clutch disc. So by the time we found out that the clutch didn't show up, we dealt with USPS. We got McLeod to put a clutch together. We got it back. We sent that to the machine shop, who then in turn had to send the clutch hubs out to another shop to get the splines cut. By the time we got that back, it was the end of racing season. All right, back at GVL Machining to get our new mag force clutch taken care of. So this is my cut off engine block with my cut off crankshaft so that I can hold my flywheel and get the right depth from here to the face of the back of the engine. Now, when we ordered our clutch, these are the original hubs, and I told them not to install them. Now look, they're only about 3/8 of an inch maybe of splines, but we have a problem where they don't fit on the Audi input shaft. So we had Jerry here at GVL machine new hubs for us. We started with this. He machined 2 of these hubs, 2 each. So 2 of these, and the one ends up fitting inside the other. Now we had to get these splines put in the city, so we had to send them out. So thanks to Peter, we had a spare input shaft that they can measure the splines off of and copy them here, which now finally we have a pilot as well. First clutch, I need to get these riveted yet. McLeod sent the rivets, but they didn't install them. And that will be the first clutch here. Now, after that, we have this plate here, which is now centered on these pins rather than those straps and welding, and gave us all that grief. Thanks to Benny, we figured that out. But now we have a perfect clutch right from the start. Now this clutch, you see how it's hollow, actually sits around that spline. Then we have this piece, which goes right here. And then we have this piece that goes right there. Now, we'll bolt that tight. We'll put the pilot in there and we'll stick it on. We have, I think, a 1/16 of an inch to spare before we hit that collar. We machined this down just an 1/8 of an inch more, which we absolutely needed. This clutch is much smaller, but is able to handle almost twice as much as the original clutch that we put in. This is not the original, but this is a mag force. It fits in this bell housing much better. It's actually a little bit more compact, I think, and should work very, very well for what we need it to do. So, there we go. Now, we took the clutch apart. When you get it, McLeod actually shims it, and these shims have to go back in the same spot. It's the way the pressure goes onto the plate. There's a lot of science in there, and they said put it back the way you found it. So we sent our ring gear to Northtown Machine, and they balance the whole rotating assembly. This is a balanced rotating assembly, so that should allow us to spin this a little bit faster without making windows. We've got our clutch finally machined. We've got our new hubs that slide onto the 01E Audi transmission. One fits inside the other. And McLeod, when they put the clutch together, they balance it already with shims and stack the shims. So our biggest power loss was probably this clutch, not this clutch, our previous clutch that burnt to a crisp. And it's been a while, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. But before I took it apart, I labeled each one 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I made zip ties in my box and did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Got all my nuts there. So I also labeled the clutch on the outside, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's going back in the exact same spot, even though we've made new hubs. I've got a new pilot shaft that I need to mail back to my buddy Pete, who rebuilt the transmission for us. This will help line up the 2 discs. I've got my pilot bearing with my centering stub removed from my old engine and put in here. And before we get too far, I'm going to seal up the valley there. We used to have a Gen 4 block. This is a Gen 3, meaning that the cam sensor is at the back now. So we actually, on this one, did he put the double roller in? He did put the double roller chain in there, meaning that we've got a cam sensor on the cam gear on the front, and we've got a cam sensor at the back with our comp cams. So we're probably going to grab the signal from the back because we don't have the timing cover with the sensor in the front. But that'll allow us to do both. The sensor on the back and the sensor on the front have the wires reversed, so we have to reverse those wires, pick up the cam sensor. But we're going to put our clutch on and put our valley pan on, put our intake on, hello, and just put the exhaust on the side, make it look like an engine. Oh, very exciting. Then we're going to bolt up our transmission and figure out, make sure that this clutch isn't any longer. I think it is. I might have to make a shim for in between the transmission and the bell housing. If that's the case, I'm going to get Oshcut to cut me a couple shims, and we'll show you guys how to go about that. So here we go. This clutch is about 3/16 of an inch longer than my old clutch, and it was actually hitting the inside of my bell housing here, and I cannot move this. I can't do anything about that because basically I've got oil right here. I can't move it back. So got a hold of Oshcut, and Oshcut cut us some spacers. I got a couple of them because I didn't know exactly, but basically they're able to map out the holes. We can space that, pop that on, and now we can mate our transmission up to our engine and have it all bolted together. Now, that took me 3 minutes to say that, and that took about 7 months to get together. So here we go. All right, so one more issue. This is a holder that we made to hold our Audi TT release bearing or slave bearing or throwout bearing. And what happened is, as soon as we pushed on our McLeod clutch, it started leaking. And trying to figure out, I disassembled one, and I thought maybe the O-ring is kind of wonky in there. What I found though, when I took a new one and I activated the clutch, I just bled the clutch and pushed on it and held this, I found the cup was actually lifting off the back. So the German engineering is tight enough that this bottoms out in a housing and this keeps this from lifting off, no issues. When I had this machined, I think I see just enough of a gap that cup backs off and has the chance to leak. So that actually happened at the very end of the track day with Speed Academy. We were about to do one more little rip, and then he's like, I lost the clutch completely. At that point, I was pretty frustrated and we put it away, but it happened again right away now that this clutch is a little bit stiffer to push on. So what we can do is just machine a hair off the surface here, just so that this bottoms out. And what we might do is just put a little bit of silicone on there. That'll fill this other gap as well on the inside. We'll just squish it out a little bit, not bottom it out, let it dry for about 10 minutes, and then tighten it in all the way. That'll act like a little gasket at the back if the machining's not perfect, whatever. But that was I think that's our last issue. So here we go. We're just threading our brake fitting in there so that our clutch line fits in there. I filled this all up with brake fluid already. So any shavings that go in there, we can squirt those out because they'll get stuck in this. We'll drill it upside down, but we'll still put some grease on this fitting. Try to keep it as clean as possible. So I shaved off just enough. You can see that? It's nice and tight there now. So that should keep the cap from lifting off. And then I did just use the belt sander and then just mic'd each corner to make sure I was doing it nice and even. Looks nice and looks wonderful. I got it nice and clean inside there, but we'll still squeeze out all the brake fluid. In case there was any filings in there, that would have squirted them out. We'll put some clean fluid in there, and then before we put it in the transmission, we'll bolt it up just outside it. We should be able to feel a rock hard pedal without any popping noises. Then it'll be a good day. If not, it's gonna be a bad day. Some goop on there. Cross your fingers. Squeeze it together and bleed it. Better than it was before. That's the end of its stroke. Rock hard pedal. Success! That was a big one. We might be able to move the car. I'm happy about that. That was a nice diagnosis, and that took about a day to figure out. That was 24 hours and a little bit of sleepless nights. Just what is going on? But the weird thing is, it shouldn't have worked at the Project Car Challenge. That gap in there, this is the same slave cylinder. I don't know why it worked for that little bit. And it did. As soon as we were beating on it with Speed Academy, it let go, and that was the end of it. So awesome. We can pop this back in again, hook the transmission and the engine up again. It should be the last time that this thing is out of the car for at least a week. Here we go. So we're gonna bolt these together and start dry fitting stuff back into the car. Here we go. Now that we have all the power going to the front tires with that limited slip, we figure we better get Peter to make us an axle too. So 2 rear axles and the right side axles are all the same length, which is the original Audi V8 1991 axle length. We had 2 cars and we had 6 axles. We actually ended up welding one together because the front left was shorter. So originally we shoved one axle end into another and welded a collar around it, but I think that this is going to be a weak point. Now instead of being a weak point, it's just going to be a spare because we had a nice new one made. So this is a custom axle. It says inner. It says inner on it. So that means that's towards the transmission. Thank you very much. 2 collars on it. We got new boots for it and spare boots. We just went to Rock Auto for these because they came with the new grease, the new boot, and the clip to hold it in place. And then we are going to redo all of our CV joints. We're gonna clean them all up and get rid of all the little hairs and probably the cat fur and start over with our new grease, and then we will be good to go for our front left axle, and we don't have to move this thing around with the forklift anymore. We can drive it. You don't want to move them without your axle being with your bolt into your wheel bearing, because the wheel bearings are 2 bearings that get squeezed together. If you roll the car around with those 2 not squeezed together, you risk damaging the wheel bearing. We got lots of spares, but better do it right the first time. Here we go. Okay, so this is the drive shaft from the Audi, and it was always a bit tight, but now with the spacers it's a bit more. So we added, I forgot how much we added, but we have to take about a 5/8 of an inch off. So just put some tape around the outside, gives you a nice straight line. And then I think this hub will actually sit in just about that much. We've scribed it so we put it back in the same spot, a line there and a line there. And then hopefully it doesn't vibrate. If it does vibrate, we'll have to send it back out to get balanced. There we go. One thing that we messed up on before was, we never had a flex in here, so it was really hard to get a good seal on the exhaust manifold. So we got Vince welding up just the a little flex piece in between, and then we got some proper flanges, all thanks to Lyle's, and now we can get a proper seal here. So once that's up, then I think that's about it for the fab work. I was just plugging in the car and getting it running. Alright, so for Project Car Challenge we had our fast rims, which held up fine, and Pilot Sport Cup 2s, but these are worn out and a little bit old. So we're going with Toyo R888Rs, which is a strictly track tire, and Fast Wheels, which is a Canadian company, actually noticed that they saw a post and they saw that we were running their wheels. So they offered us another set because we've got 10-inch wide on the front, 8-inch on the back. This gives us the opportunity to start mixing and matching, running all 8s, running all 10s, just to see how it handles better. So for now, we're gonna throw these on and see what happens. Here we go. All right, hope you enjoyed that. That was actually footage from quite a while back. Scott's going to be working on our third engine real soon. Next video is going to be talking about our turbos. Now, a lot of comments going, why did you use 4 turbos? Why wouldn't you just go one big one? And Andy from Jensen's Speed Shop, where we dynoed it, said the exact same thing until the end of the dyno run where he took everything back. So definitely watch Will Ford Turbos Boost and LS, but we also talked to Borg Warner engineers who we met at SEMA and follow the channel, and he was pretty excited. This is what you need to do. That small turbo comes on really quick and gives us lots of boost right away, but it has to open a wastegate and then feed the K27. So the K16 is choking the engine out, he said. You need to port that hot side and be able to figure out how to flow more air through it. Once you do that, it'll be a perfect match. So we hit up Turbo Parts Canada in Ottawa and visited Nick, who was able to do just that. So now we feel that we have a better turbo setup for the car. And the only reason we went with the 4 turbos is because nobody else did it. And when we kind of jokingly put it on engine dyno, it did exactly what I wanted it to do. High torque at low RPM. When Dave was driving from Speed Academy, our safety was 25 PSI where it starts cutting ignition, and he was doing that at 4,300 RPM already. So if you're thinking they're laggy, they're not so laggy. They're actually a pretty good fit. Pretty cool feeling. So yeah, stick around for that. Thanks for watching, guys. Lots more Audi videos coming up, and this year's gonna be a great year. Have some fun with it, build it, use your imagination, and that's kind of what I did with this. And I gotta tell you, I have to work on the car and then walk away because I can't sleep when I'm working on the car because I get so into it. It's awesome. Anyway, we'll see you on the next one. Here we go.